Welcome to HD Rare Coins, your ultimate source for rare coins, fascinating history, and the thrill of discovery. From legendary pennies to hidden gems, we explore the world of numismatics one amazing coin at a time. In the quiet hum of post-war America, as the country settled into the rhythms of a new decade, few would suspect that a tiny copper coin slipping through the fingers of everyday citizens would one day become a sought-after treasure worth a staggering $160,000. The year was 1960. Dwight D. Eisenhower was in the White House. Elvis Presley was topping the charts. And in the U.S. Mint, a simple yet crucial shift was taking place, one that would ripple through the numismatic world for decades to come. It all began with a change that seemed minor on the surface. A shift in the date style. Some coins minted in 1960 featured a small date, while others bore a large date. To the untrained eye, the difference might appear negligible. But to collectors, this subtle variation represented a unique opportunity. The small date 1960 Lincoln cent, particularly those minted in Philadelphia without a mint mark, would soon be recognized not just for its rarity but for the story it told, a story of oversight, of transition, and of immense value. The Lincoln cent had been a staple of American currency since 1909, introduced to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the coin was groundbreaking, marking the first time a real person, and a president, no less, graced a U.S. coin intended for general circulation. By 1960, the coin had already undergone a few design tweaks, including the removal of Brenner's initials in the early years and the eventual redesign of the reverse to include the Lincoln Memorial in 1959. That 1959 redesign was a significant moment. Frank Gasparo's depiction of the Lincoln Memorial replaced the original wheat ears on the reverse, a tribute to both the man and the monument built in his honor. Within the tiny space of the cent's reverse, Gasparo managed to include not just a grand architectural symbol but a miniature rendering of the seated Lincoln statue itself, a detail so minute it required magnification to truly appreciate that. As 1960 rolled around, the U.S. Mint was operating at full steam. The country's booming economy meant an increasing demand for coinage. Philadelphia and Denver, the two main mints handling cent production that year, were under pressure to meet the needs of commerce. In that haste, something curious occurred. The master dies used to create the coin's date were altered mid-year. Some coins from earlier in the year were struck with numerals that were shorter and more closely spaced, the small date. Others, minted later, bore a bolder, more prominent font, the large date. For reasons still debated among collectors and mint historians, this change wasn't officially documented at the time. But sharp-eyed numismatists began to notice. Especially notable was the 1960 small date cent from the Philadelphia Mint. While millions were struck, significantly fewer of these were saved in pristine condition. The coins were used, exchanged, pocketed, and spent, rarely appreciated for what they were. It wasn't until years later, as coin collecting surged in popularity, that this cent began to garner attention. What makes the small date Philadelphia cent so valuable isn't just its date variation. It's the combination of scarcity, condition, and the mystique surrounding minting anomalies. Collectors prize coins that defy the norm, those that slipped through the cracks of routine minting processes and emerged as anomalies. The 1960 small date cent, especially in high grades like MS 67 or above, is one such anomaly, yet, rarity alone isn't enough to drive value. The market is built not only on what is scarce but also on what is desired. And desire, in the world of numismatics, is a powerful thing. As collectors started building Lincoln cent sets, the need to include every major variety became essential. A complete collection meant obtaining both the 1960 large date and small date versions, from both Philadelphia and Denver. This fueled demand, and with demand came rising prices. As auction records began to break into the tens of thousands, the true star emerged, those flawless or near-flawless examples, preserved in untouched rolls or hoards, that could grade at the top of the scale. When one such coin appeared at a major auction, certified by a top grading service as MS 67 Red, the bidding war was fierce. By the time the hammer fell, the final price shocked even seasoned collectors. $160,000, for a 1-cent coin, but this value wasn't pulled from thin air. It was the culmination of decades of appreciation, of gradual recognition, and of growing reverence for the Lincoln cent series as a whole. The coin had become more than a piece of currency, it was a symbol of mid-century America, of subtlety in design, and of the unexpected value hidden in plain sight. The journey of this humble copper coin from pocket change to a prized collectible is emblematic of how history, chance, and passion intersect in the world of numismatics. Collectors often say that the thrill lies not just in the coin itself, but in the story it tells. And the 1960 penny has no shortage of tales to whisper, each one forged in the echoes of presses, shuffling mint employees, and the meticulous eyes of numismatic scholars who would later decode its significance. To understand why this cent became such a phenomenon, you need to imagine the minting environment of 1960. The Philadelphia Mint, already burdened with immense production quotas, was grappling with equipment upgrades and die life issues. Dies, the hardened metal tools used to stamp designs onto coin blanks, were replaced more frequently due to wear. Each new set of dies carried small differences, even if unintentional. One such change led to the distinct differences in the number 9 and the 6 in the year. The small date version appeared slimmer, with more curvature in the 6, giving it an elegant but understated presence. What's more fascinating is that these changes weren't meant to create collectible variations. There was no intention to spark interest or fuel a future frenzy in the hobby. These were simply technical adjustments, routine, almost invisible to the general public. But to the numismatists of the future, these tiny details would become goldmines of discovery. It wasn't long before publications began highlighting the difference. The Coin World magazine, one of the foremost voices in the community, featured analyses that helped spread the awareness. Dealers started listing both date types, and suddenly, demand surged, yet this surge was also tied to a larger cultural shift. The 1960s were a transformative decade for coin collecting in America. Baby boomers, growing up in an age of post-war prosperity, found themselves with allowances and change jars. The hobby was accessible, educational, and thrilling, each coin a potential treasure. Lincoln cents became a gateway into this world. They were easy to find, easy to collect, and full of subtle varieties that offered a sense of achievement for sharp-eyed youngsters and seasoned collectors alike. Within this context, the 1960 small date penny stood out. As knowledge of its rarity spread, more and more collectors sought it out. Prices began to rise, not dramatically at first, but steadily. What could once be pulled from circulation for a cent began trading for $1, then 5, then 10. Coin shops saw increased traffic from curious buyers with magnifying glasses, scrutinizing date styles with intensity. And slowly, the legend began to take shape. Meanwhile, the condition of the coin became a key factor in its valuation. Coins in mint state, those that had never been circulated, were exponentially more valuable than their worn-down counterparts. But even among mint state coins, the difference between an MS-64 and an MS-67 was vast. That difference lay in luster, in eye appeal, in the absence of even the tiniest blemishes. And finding a 1960 small date cent in MS-67 red. That was a needle in a haystack. Red, in coin grading terms, refers to the original copper color preserved since the coin left the mint. Over time, copper oxidizes and turns brown, so a red cent from 1960 means it was impeccably stored, untouched by air or moisture for decades. It's a snapshot in time, a preserved relic from a moment when America was on the brink of enormous cultural change. Collectors who owned original rolls of 1960 cents, particularly those from Philadelphia, found themselves sitting on small fortunes. Some of these rolls had been tucked away in drawers or safe deposit boxes, forgotten for years. When they resurfaced, often in estate sales or auctions, they were met with eager eyes and escalating bids. Grading services like PCGS and NGC added a layer of trust and legitimacy to these evaluations. A coin authenticated and graded by these institutions could fetch many times what an ungraded piece might command. As the market matured, key players began to emerge. Dealers specializing in Lincoln cents built reputations on their expertise. Auction houses started featuring the 1960 small date as a centerpiece in their catalogs. And each time a record-breaking sale was reported, it added fuel to the fire. The coin was no longer just a collectible, it was a benchmark, a bragging right, a centerpiece of a serious collection, and yet, beyond the numbers, beyond the glitter of auction rooms and the thrill of discovery, this coin connects us to something deeper. To an era when details mattered. When a 1-cent piece could carry not just economic value, but cultural weight. When tiny variations whispered stories of human hands, mechanical decisions, and the invisible passage of time. In the fading twilight of the early 1980s, as Ronald Reagan's America surged forward with optimism, economic shifts, and a rising tide of innovation, a tiny copper-plated coin quietly made its way into the pockets, drawers, and piggy banks of millions of Americans. To most, it was a penny, a simple, unassuming 1-cent piece with Lincoln's profile stamped on the obverse and the familiar Lincoln Memorial anchoring the reverse. But for the keen-eyed collector, the year 1984 held a secret. A variety so subtle, so delicate in its design quirk, that it would eventually transform into one of the most valuable treasures of modern numismatics. It wasn't forged from gold or silver. It bore no intricate engravings or ceremonial origins. And yet, its story would captivate the collecting world and command a price of $170,000. To understand how such a seemingly ordinary coin could rise to such prestige, we have to go back to the roots of the Lincoln cent itself. First issued in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. Victor David Brenner's design was both revolutionary and elegant, capturing the solemn dignity of the 16th president in a profile that would become one of the most recognized images in American history. For decades, the Lincoln cent remained consistent in form, enduring wars, economic shifts, and cultural revolutions, but by 1982, a seismic shift occurred beneath the surface. Rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to transition the coin's composition from nearly solid copper to a core of zinc coated with a thin layer of copper. From that year forward, the penny retained its appearance, but not its heart. It was lighter, cheaper to produce, and slightly different in how it aged. The change opened the door to new minting challenges and subtle errors, some of which would later become major discoveries. By 1984, the Mint had settled into the new production process, but not without hiccups. The Denver and Philadelphia mints were producing billions of pennies to meet national demand. It was during this chaotic churn of mass production that a curious mistake was born, one that would take years to identify and decades to fully appreciate. Amid the flood of 1984 pennies came a rare and distinct variety now known as the 1984 double die obverse. It wasn't announced. There was no memo, no media coverage. Just a slight, nearly imperceptible doubling on Lincoln's earlobe, that might seem trivial, until you see it. On the right specimen, Lincoln's profile bears a ghostly echo of his ear, a second lobe, lightly etched behind the original. To the average person, it might look like a trick of the light. But to those in the know, it is a signal. A beacon. A mark of rarity caused by a misalignment during the hubbing process, when the die used to strike coins is formed. If the hub and die shift ever so slightly between impressions, the resulting die creates coins with doubled features. Most are subtle, often missed. But the 1984 doubled ear is unmistakable once spotted. For years, these coins went unnoticed. They were spent and respent, passing from hand to hand without a second thought. But slowly, collectors began to notice. In coin shops and local shows, whispers started, rumors of a strange doubled ear on some 1984 cents. Experts took a closer look and confirmed the doubling. It wasn't a one-off fluke. It was a true doubled die. The excitement began to build. The Lincoln cent series has always been a favorite for variety collectors. From the famous 1955 double die to the countless small variations in mint marks, dates, and design tweaks, it has offered an endless frontier of exploration. The 1984 doubled ear became a crown jewel among these, particularly because it emerged in the modern era. After most assumed that such dramatic varieties were a thing of the past, demand surged. Price guides adjusted. Coin grading services began certifying the variety, and collectors scoured their change jars, hoping to spot the elusive double. But here's the catch, most examples showed heavy circulation. They were scratched, worn, and discolored. Finding one in pristine, uncirculated condition became the real challenge. And as more collectors entered the market, the few high-grade examples skyrocketed in value. The nature of this coin's appeal is layered. First, there's the rarity. Only a tiny fraction of the 1984 cents minted bear the double die error. Then, there's the condition. Coins that were saved early, never touched by circulation, and preserved in original rolls or mint sets, have the best shot at achieving top grades like MS-66 or MS-67. But even among those, very few are perfectly struck, fully read, and free from the faintest contact marks. It was one of these few that eventually stunned the collecting world. At a major auction, a 1984 double die cent in MS-67 red, its color blazing like it had just left the press, was offered to a packed room of dealers, collectors, and investors. Bidding started strong and only intensified. Phone lines buzzed. Online platforms flooded with bids. And when the final gavel dropped, the room gasped. $170,000. For a penny, that number wasn't just a price, it was a declaration. A reminder that modern coins, often overlooked, could hold just as much intrigue and value as ancient rarities. That mistakes, when preserved in perfection, could become monuments. And that the smallest details, like a second earlobe, could carry enormous weight. The story of the 1984 penny is still being written. Somewhere, in forgotten jars or unsearched rolls, more examples may lie in wait. They might sit unrecognized in dealer trays or cling to the bottoms of piggy banks. The thrill of the hunt remains alive. Each time someone picks up a 1984 cent and holds it to the light, there's a spark of possibility. Could this be the one? Because that's what keeps collectors coming back. The hope. The history. The magic hidden in plain sight. And the chance that, with patience and precision, a single penny might just be worth a fortune. T's hard to imagine, standing in line at a grocery store or sifting through the change in your car's console, that one of those tiny copper coins might carry a secret. Yet, that's the magic of coins like the 1984 double die cent. Their value isn't in the material. Zinc and copper together are worth only a fraction of a cent. Their true worth is in the layers of history they carry, the stories embedded in their flaws, and the journey they've taken from mint to myth. By the mid-1980s, technology at the US Mint was progressing, but perfection was still elusive. Minting was a high-speed process designed for volume, not precision art. Dies were still created by mechanical hubbing, a method that required multiple impressions to transfer the design from hub to die. If the hub shifted even slightly between strikes, the result was doubling, sometimes so minor it was invisible without magnification, and sometimes dramatic enough to redefine a coin's legacy. The 1984 penny wasn't alone in its errors. Other years had their varieties, their quirks, their minor imperfections. But few were as clear, and as visually compelling, as Lincoln's doubled earlobe. It gave the coin a personality, a visual cue that said, something went wrong here, and in that deviation from the standard, it became something more than just a unit of currency. It became a collector's prize. The numismatic community, ever vigilant, took notice. Detailed photos and comparisons appeared in coin magazines and newsletters. Experts mapped the contours of the doubling, discussing whether it was Class 1 or Class 4 doubling, whether the die had shifted north or east, and how many examples might exist. Coin forums buzzed with speculation and sightings. Collectors brought their finds to dealers, hoping to hear the magic words, "Yes, this is the one." One of the great appeals of the 1984 double die cent is that it invites discovery. Unlike ultra-rare 19th century gold pieces or error coins with microscopic die chips, this variety can actually be found, if you're looking. It levels the playing field. A young collector with a few dollars worth of pennies can get lucky. A seasoned expert with a microscope might find what others miss. That sense of accessibility, of treasure hiding in plain sight, is part of what makes the hunt so addictive. and it's not just about money. For many, the thrill of finding a 1984 double die cent isn't about turning a profit, but about holding history in their hand. This coin, this 1-cent piece, bears witness to a moment of imperfection in an otherwise routine process. It's a freeze frame of a machine's misalignment, a worker's oversight, a production anomaly that slipped through and entered the wild. But what's remarkable is how something so small can tell such a big story. Each coin is like a time capsule. The 1984 cent comes from an era of economic recovery, Cold War tension, and technological change. MTV was in its prime, the Macintosh computer had just launched, and the US Mint was adapting to the new zinc-based penny composition. In a way, that tiny doubled earlobe feels symbolic, an echo of an earlier, more analog age. As America stepped into the digital frontier, collectors have long been drawn to coins that defy expectations. And this one fits the mold perfectly, minted in massive quantities, yet rare in its flaw, common in appearance, yet extraordinary in its detail. The vast majority of 1984 cents are worthless beyond their face value. But a select few, those that slipped through with a double die, are numismatic celebrities. They are catalogued, discussed, insured, and displayed.